Welcome to the Christopher Peter Review, the economic perspective on our public policy, our economy, and our overall society. The term social construct refers to the mental framework societies use to guide social behaviors, both indirectly and directly. The term was raised not that long ago in the height of the Summer of Love riots. The hysteria-driven critics were not completely wrong in the idea that racism and other forms of hate are a social construct. But I believe they were completely wrong in advocating for a new social construct where everything is perceived to be as hate and that our race, gender, religion, political affiliation, and other demographics should be a deciding factor in social and economic life. Social constructs are not inherently wrong or evil. Many times they can be useful in protecting fairness, acceptable social behaviors, ethical actions, or permitting society to function in a civilized manner. Sometimes outdated social constructs can outlive their usefulness and we may need to rethink how we use that construct in the future. In this episode, I am going to discuss some bad social constructs that need to be updated. The growing industry in artificial intelligence. How we can improve the recruitment process for prospective employees. And we'll end with a conversation on the dangerous trends in our political environment. Let us begin another episode of the Christopher Peter Review. There is some relative optimism surrounding the condition of our national economy, largely related to the appearance of a pretty healthy financial market. The Dow, Nasdaq, and S&P have recently set record highs, despite some volatility. From an investor perspective, there are some opportunities that presented themselves in a time when little optimism existed given the grave concern over a possible recession. A closer look at where those returns are coming from and the trend continues into 2024 that existed in 2023. The financial markets are almost exclusively being buoyed by the big players in the artificial intelligence space. Or what is now being described as the artificial intelligence industry. The market darling in NVIDIA, the producer of the preferred chip used to facilitate the artificial intelligence computing devices, is constantly on the rise, reaching the top of the market cap rankings fairly quickly. Microsoft, who is backing the founding company behind ChatGPT, is delivering strong results as well. Google has also been up and down with its launch of Gemini, impacted with some kinks in it that they are working to address. Nonetheless, the artificial intelligence craze that is at a level not seen since probably the invention of social media is creating a buzz over its future potential and the opportunity to change a great deal in everyday life. As every company seems to be messaging about artificial intelligence, it is important to realize how it already impacts our lives before looking at future opportunities. Many homes are already using artificial intelligence even though it was not sold to them as such. How many people have Amazon's Alexa units throughout their homes? Or Google's version? You can conveniently place orders on your preferred e-commerce site, call people to come to the table to eat a meal, or set reminders for your to-do lists. Ask for help with your children's homework, assistance with what used to be simple calculations, or entertain a group of people with a host of games and trivia. Remember when you would call a customer service hotline and it was a gamble of whether the person would understand you? You still get that experience. But now it is an artificial intelligence prompt that you are interacting with. Before you finally get a human who will make the artificial intelligence script appear more helpful. But the technology is helping with reducing the angst associated with wait times and providing reps with more information ahead of time. Helping to balance the process in place of the hold music people generally despise. Artificial intelligence is already vital for use in financial regulation, law enforcement, and national security. Financial regulators can keep tabs on an industry growing more complex and tech-driven by using artificial intelligence to identify patterns of behaviors that may be a result of criminal behavior, fraud, or corruption. Ever wonder how the police seem to solve the crimes that make national or state headlines, despite being unable to find viable suspects for many not-so-popular events? Artificial technology helps law enforcement identify criminals in crowds of people with facial recognition, connect pieces of evidence, and create profiles to help bring criminals to justice and give investigators credible leads. Also, artificial intelligence has greatly impacted healthcare, with the technology embedded in laboratory analyzers to help with the diagnosis of diseases and illness. With some platforms even able to provide physicians with a menu of treatment options to consider when treating the impacted patients. This will reduce the care time and allow for more patients to receive more accurate health care. So what can be the next big opportunity for artificial intelligence? This is the aspect where an entrepreneur, an investor will seek their opportunity to make money. Which is not a bad thing. If there is value to be created, entrepreneur and investors help to bring those ideas to the market in a manner that is scalable. In this space, there are numerous opportunities to expand on what is already in place or apply the technology to new areas of our economy and society. Keeping inside of healthcare, the opportunity to better manage hospital units can be assisted with artificial intelligence, being able to identify where nurses are most needed and which patients can be left to rest and recover while those who need more intervention receive nurses' attention. Also, the scheduling of appointments and follow-ups can be managed with this technology, further reducing the tasks done by clerical staff, who could focus on improving their interactions with patients. Beyond healthcare, given the number of companies that offer services in regards to employee management systems and processes, there are many opportunities to use the technology to better track employee contributions to your organization, identify who is promotable and who is in need of training, and manage compensation trends better. The monotonous tasks with human resource tracking can be alleviated with artificial intelligence. The big idea areas could be industries like law, finance, and agriculture. In law, technology is already driving change and reducing the human intervention in document review, filings, and other tasks previously done with low-level attorneys or paralegals. But consider the amount of time saved in negotiating settlements, judgments, and pleas if artificial intelligence was able to provide a prescribed outcome based on historical outcomes. Imagine the reduction of backlogs in court systems and regulatory agencies. In finance, artificial intelligence technology can help improve investing practices. Also, it can help create budgeting software for people to improve their personal finances, increasing savings, investing, and reducing unnecessary spending. There are so many applications in the financial space that it is endless. Like real estate and improving bidding to allow for more reasoned and data-driven bids to protect the affordability in housing. I am a big supporter of the agriculture industry, and I think that artificial intelligence could be useful in the operation of a farm, where there is already equipment that can detect harvest-ready crops. But maybe using the technology to make more efficient processes in irrigation, limiting water to where it is truly needed, or fertilizing helps to reduce waste. As is the case with any new technology, the opportunity can also include unintended consequences and risks. While it is human nature to run forward towards the positives, there is a real need to address the potential downsides that can be reasonably anticipated ahead of time. Some professions may see the demand for actual labor diminish with the use of technology. Obviously, there will be some areas that can be somewhat completely replaced with artificial intelligence. For example, the recent writers' strike was greatly impacted by the potential risks writers face with the use of AI in creating material formerly constructed by a human comedian or writer. We have seen radio shows created using artificial intelligence. Even in this podcast, I use artificial intelligence to formulate different points of views to offer on my topics. It helps reduce the time, effort, and needed headcount. Something many small businesses or other organizations may need to maintain cost. Back to the writers, I recently talked briefly about the set of comedians who took a proactive approach in trying to address the potential loss of business they could predictably experience if the technology uses their likeness and signature style in AI-generated content. A concern with the generated content is whether it will match the quality. What makes comedy so special is the delivery and the timing that goes into it. Just reading words from a script does not make something necessarily funny. Same issue with dramatic writing. While the writers see it as a threat to their craft, the technology could also be something that helps them create content in a more efficient manner. Leverage the technology to create the text and become more of an editor by revising to create the comedic moments or the dramatic effect that is needed. Use the technology to increase economic opportunity. It may appear that you are shifting your role or devaluing the artistic content your brand provides. But the end product that a studio is buying or an advertiser is seeking is a written document that creates end value. If you are using artificial intelligence to create more of those in a faster time period, then maybe it will not be as beneficial for them to cut the middle person out and still pay for that special ingredient that technology cannot replace. The potential impact on writers seemed fairly obvious. Another profession that could be greatly impacted would be the legal industry and corporate law. As I mentioned earlier, a common practice with many law firms is the use of artificial technology to review agreements, documents, and filings. During my pursuit of my MBA, I worked with a law firm whose attorneys were already worried about the impact technology would have on the industry and noted that law schools were graduating more than the industry could employ. This was almost a decade ago, and now you attorneys take their skill set elsewhere in terms of using their negotiating skills in sales and procurement. Knowledge of law, legal review, and such in positions like risk analysis and compliance programs. There are some people that may be placed out. For instance, if artificial intelligence is leveraged in education systems, how many professors, teachers, or other staff may be no longer needed? There may be a need for retraining and placement into new careers. While this is a concern, people are resilient and the economy adapts. People will be able to find new human-driven opportunities. That is always what happens. The full scope of benefits is not currently known and may not be known for quite some time. What people can do is find ways it can help their business, their work, and other endeavors. Artificial intelligence is a new industry. A very promising one.
My name is Jennifer. Welcome to my segment of the podcast. The nominating process is officially over. Former President Donald Trump will face off against Joe Biden for a second term for both candidates. Biden ran largely unopposed, except for a few contenders with less name recognition. Robert Kennedy Jr., Dean Phillips, and Marianne Williamson gave ill-fated efforts to unseat the sitting president. On the other side, Donald Trump held off a field of 12 early candidates including popular Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Senator Tim Scott, and others. Trump entered the race with a significant mathematical advantage. One that held throughout. Much of the Republican field tested the waters but eventually read the tea leaves and left the race early, living to run another day. Nikki Haley did not. She continued an ill-fated attempt to offer an unwanted alternative to Donald Trump, suffering some damaging losses on the way. Not sure if she is a viable candidate going forward. But she finally accepted what we all knew earlier. Now it is the MAGA agenda battling the Build Back Better crowd that does not know what was built back or made better. America is going through some tough times that are a direct result of the public policy put in place by the current administration. The record inflation may have cooled, but the negative effect has not subsided. The job market appears to continue to produce jobs, but those are second sources of income for those individuals not able to make it on one salary. The Biden administration inherited a world in peace. Now there are two global conflicts not able to be thwarted by what is perceived as weakness and ineffective policy. Resurfacing of past historic tensions and the known threats doing what many feared. And our southern border is a disaster. Something we will discuss later this week. But the executive orders issued by Joe Biden are causing records of illegal border crossing that are harming our communities and draining resources needed elsewhere. The question is not whether America needs change. Rather, the question is whether Donald Trump is the solution, and also will a second Trump term yield the same results as the first, which people generally approved of. A challenge we must acknowledge is the fact that Trump himself has alienated many of the people who were largely responsible for the success of the policies enacted during his first term. Not sure many of those individuals will return if he wins in November. Maybe some will. Maybe new ones are needed. Biden is showing regression each and every day. Many Americans did not want the rematch that we will experience in November. Republicans want Biden to retire or accept biological reality. Democrats want Trump to be removed from ballots because he had the nerve of defeating Hillary. Trump will be on all the ballots after the recent ruling. Biden will be on the ballot, barring a last-minute change of mind. One of them will get a second term.
There are many challenges for companies in recruiting talent to fill positions of need in their various departments. Likewise, there are many obstacles and inconveniences that make job hunting an unlikable experience for candidates seeking new positions. In order to make the process more effective, I believe there are reasonable changes that can benefit both the employer seeking candidates and candidates seeking a new employer. Improving the process of salary negotiations, eliminating irrelevant criteria, and vetting references that can speak to performance without jeopardizing standing in case a transition is not made are reasonable changes. The idea of some states requiring salary ranges on the job description at first seemed like an unreasonable requirement. Although I get there is a demographics issue in salary negotiations, I do not believe just because you are weak at something you should be exempt from it. I do believe negotiating is an important skill in any job. That is first shown during your salary talks. If you cannot make a case of why you should be paid the salary you requested, then why should the employer believe any proposal you offer them while on the job? The idea that salary should not reflect your skills, experience, and education rather than a one-size-fits-all is off-putting. But I do agree that it is a complete waste of time to interview for a job and find out the organization pays less than your needs or expectations. Candidates would not apply for jobs that pay less than they currently make. And companies do not want to waste their time with candidates who want more than they are willing to pay. Why would either side act against their respective economic interest? Posting the salary range provides both sides with a framework and understanding that if selected, the candidate is willing to accept an offer in this specified range and the company is willing to pay in that range. Seeing that states are not letting companies ask about salary history is a good sign. What someone made prior to working for you is irrelevant. If they received a good-sized bump by joining your organization, then why would you really care if it is changing what you normally pay for that position? People are generally looking for greater compensation when looking for a new job. Sure, there are other factors, but compensation is the key factor. People do not take less money if they do not have to. And no one is going to leave one employer for another employer that pays less. Companies do at times have to adjust their cost of labor and may want to reduce the offer amounts. It can be done in a transparent manner. See what skill sets are essential, what the going rates of those skill sets, and does experience matter in end results. Speaking about useless criteria, I do not think people should be excluded from a job for criteria that are not impactful to performance or their potential behavior in the role of hired. I do think criminal records matter to some degree, but do credit scores matter in positions outside of finance, accounting, or such? Some say it speaks to trust in a person and whether or not they are a person of their word. But I know plenty of people that have reported high credit scores that are people you would not want to hire. I know people with bad credit scores who are trustworthy. One must also consider whether the credit score is truly reflective of the person at the moment, as you know, information lingers longer than it probably should. In past places of employment, the credit score was raised as a potential criteria for consideration. And I asked the team, what does it matter when the person we are bringing in will have nothing to do with finances? There is a lot of information about people that may make you feel one way or another. But how much of that information is relevant to the job you are hiring for? Depending on the position and the organization, there might need to be more disclosure. Interesting how much some companies want to know about people they are hiring for the least impactful positions, but do not want to answer any questions for the same reason. What is really going to determine if a person is qualified is the strength of their resume, the verification that they work those positions, the education quality, and the quality of their references. In terms of references, who is going to really provide you with references that are going to say anything bad about them? Even in the most anonymous environment, people are not going to provide you with people who will say anything bad about them. People put their best foot forward when applying for jobs. It is not always the most honest foot, as I have seen at times. For instance, I was part of an interview process where the person's resume just screamed something was not right. And the person had trouble explaining away the gaps in the experience they claimed they had and the obvious questions raised when doing a basic Google search of the companies they claimed to work at. The person shaped a story of an international business that we contradicted by the company describing itself as locally focused and sourced enterprise. The candidate got antsy and pointed out that his references could back his claim. He started to sweat when countered that none of the people he asked to be references ever worked at the places he claimed as places of employment. There is a not-so-secret trick of Googling the people you interview and the people listed as references. Your friends are not valid references unless you worked in a paid role with them and they can speak to your skill set. No one is going to list people that do not speak highly of them. But what if the person cannot list a past or current manager or supervisor? I think that unless your current manager or supervisor is cool with the idea of you leaving, they generally should not be a reference. If you do not get the job or decide not to accept it, then you put yourself in a negative position. Some people do not tolerate what they perceive as disloyalty. I think the pool of references should be enlarged to include potential clients, customers, external parties that relied on your work, and potential colleagues that depended on your efforts or contributions in a work or external environment like community service.
The State of the Union is typically a dog and pony show, cherry-picking the positive moments of the past year while avoiding the shortcomings. Or deflecting blame for them. I never watch the event live. I prefer to read the transcript afterwards. Regardless of who the president is. Doing so helps remove the showmanship and focus on the substance and ideas for the upcoming year. In this year's State of the Union address, there was not much substance in it. Simply a campaign speech passed as a State of the Union. In theory, the speech is not supposed to be a campaign-style speech, more so an outline of what is to come in the succeeding 12 months. Joe Biden continues to play up the fight for democracy theme as he references clips from the past. But the presidents he brought up in his speech faced challenges of the moment, not ones resulting from perceived weakness and inaction. Biden wants to talk about fighting for the soul of America and our democracy, but his party, his administration, and his surrogates are really the only ones that are actively harming democracy and trying to actively manipulate election contests by influencing opposition primary campaigns, as reported by many outlets. Sure, Trump did not take the results of the 2020 election well. But neither did Hillary Clinton. Biden spoke about Russia and China as if his administration is succeeding in containing their threats. Russia proceeded with its invasion and is largely unharmed by the sanctions thanks to its partners in China and other sympathetic nations. China's mishandling of another outbreak and policy errors are largely the cause of its own economic challenges. Experiencing deflation while it continues to fly spy balloons over our territory. Biden wants to paint a rosy picture of the American economy, a narrative Americans are largely rejecting because it does not connect with the reality that they are facing. He wants to make Americans believe that he is creating records of new jobs. But he is counting jobs that were paused and simply restarted. And part-time employment on top of the full-time positions people are working. Never before has a president bragged about the additional burden faced by the people. The rate of growth for inflation has slowed, but the impact is not subsiding one bit. The cost of housing is still high and available units still somewhat scarce. He claims to be a capitalist, but his economic policies are more of a socialist, where his administration champions things the market is not ready or willing to commit to right now. Capitalists by nature meet the needs of the public at the moment. I do think that the CHIPS Act was a positive policy position, reducing our dependence on critical inputs away from a nation that probably will be invaded. The climate policy is a great deal of fluff, as there are no real signs of the Climate Corp doing anything beneficial for society. Trying to reduce the cost of education should involve actually reducing the cost of education, and should not be in the radical manner he is proposing. America is far less safe than the society he inherited in 2021. I do not think for 1 second any reasonable person accepts the narrative that crime is down. It just is not being prosecuted. Illegal immigration is raging out of control and crimes are being purposefully overlooked. People are not comfortable as they were in the past when traveling in our cities. The speech was also just a rehash of the same messages from 2022, but focused on themes Republicans struggled to counter. You may be right on the issues of the moment, but need to anticipate and counter when the opposition changes the scope of the debate. Republicans will need to do a better job on defending the Roe v. Wade decision, which was not a political one. It was the right legal decision. That is simply a fact. Republicans will need to show Americans a policy approach that is not complete bans without exemptions to contrast the abortion as birth control approach Democrats are flouting across every blue state. Weirdly and coincidentally in minority communities. Biden tries to tout a unity agenda, but the little policy points he presented were far from uniting. Simply pandering and leveraging divisions. Biden wants to appear for women's safety but will not support limitations on transgenders competing against women. As long as you identify as a woman, you will be able to harm a woman.
My personal belief is that people should not live by sayings or use sayings as the justification for their actions. People who use sayings are usually covering for their lack of a logical defense for their position. Or want to use other people's thoughts to speak for them. Now, sayings can help with storytelling. And can clear up some potential misperceptions. But, I do not think we can use these sayings as the sole reason for anything. Many times, the sayings are leveraging social constructs that are outdated, no longer relevant, and potentially harmful in the current environment. The first saying that I think needs to be done away with is the idea that there are no dumb questions. The reason we use this saying is because it generally creates an environment that encourages social interaction with a group. People are free to ask questions that come to mind with obsessing over how people will perceive them afterwards. For instance, I was involved with a company where the director would always state in meetings that there are no dumb questions. Yet, he would hold questions that he thought reflected poorly for his workers against them. If there are no dumb questions, then why set the trap? I helped him see that was probably the reason his team was not as satisfied as others in the department. When I was in middle school, my English teacher told us there are dumb questions. Whoever tells you otherwise is lying to you. He went on to explain what he would define as a dumb question. If you ask a question directly addressed by something just stated, then it is a dumb question because either you are clearly not paying attention. The example came right afterward when my friend sitting next to me asked when our papers were due, when the due date, requirements, and length were clearly written on the side of the board closest to us. Unfortunately, he provided this moment all on his own. Not part of the lesson. In my experience doing contracting, I did learn that sometimes we do ask questions to stuff we just heard because we needed to clarify potential issues with interpretations of the clauses that lawyers purposefully leave vague and ambiguous. I think the saying is outdated because with the amount of information, data, and social knowledge available, there is little reason to not research certain things before asking another person. When your first reaction is to ask another person, you are telling that person that you are not bothering to waste your time to get a basic understanding and that their time is less valuable. At the very least, do your research and then ask someone to expand upon the areas where you lack understanding, and their experience would eliminate confusion. And make sure to credit them for their contributions. That is another issue that is very common. People do not take time to put in any effort. Ask another person to assist them. And then pass it off as if they created the final product and are wholly responsible. This is why I see people can be generally hesitant to assist others, because they end up doing the heavy lifting and the other person is not decent enough to show any basic gratitude. Another saying that I always thought was something that is unhelpful and just flat out wrong was that the customer is always right. The saying is one meant to help facilitate business transactions. How can you make a potential paying customer feel like they are doing something wrong when the whole goal of sales is to make customers feel good about giving your organization their hard-earned dollars in exchange for a desired good or services? I do believe that the messenger is generally responsible for how a message can be interpreted. And also, it is generally not in the best interest of a person whose income is directly dependent on a sale to make a mountain of a molehill. A low commission is always better than no commission any day and twice on Sunday. But there are times when the best approach is to decide not to do business with that particular customer. The idea that a business should serve every customer is not really based on reality. Business should not be denied based on demographics, but some customers simply offer too many obstacles and little opportunity for sustained value. Sometimes there are more favorable customers to focus on and let another provider better positioned to serve difficult customers handle that base. The business should be smart enough to evaluate the value if it is a business-to-business relationship or a business-to-consumer one. I remember during my time working retail, I encountered a customer who would make false claims about the prices in order to get lower prices. She would always say in response, "Is the customer not always right in this store?" Unfortunately, when she came into my line, she was not right. She tried to use that same approach after manipulating the price tags of an item. What she failed to notice was a camera above her. When I was instructed to do a price check, the other end was security asking me to delay her. She was behaving as your typical Karen, thinking I was going to be in trouble. Her attitude and demeanor changed when the boys in blue arrived. You would think a person who did the same thing at a sporting goods store might show a bit of humility. Apparently, switching the price tag on high-end sports equipment combined with what she just did in our store gave enough evidence to local authorities. Ironically, our security tended to work multiple jobs. Like the rest of us. The customer is not always right even when they are not being mischievous. Sometimes, the sales representative needs to be able to handle the situation as best they can and determine when it makes sense to accommodate a customer's not able to conform or send them elsewhere. The basic idea that one group of people should be treated as always being in the right is unhelpful. Consider the unfair burden placed on the other group of people your organization will hold responsible for achieving sales targets, profit margins, and customer satisfaction. Now, we all know that there are limits to this social construct. The cost of accommodation can determine how likely a business will satisfy a customer on the right side of the issue. The attitude will change then from cordial to confrontational. The ideal of assuming one group is always in the right is a nifty sales gimmick, but one that is a completely unworkable social construct. The person who is accurate is right. Sometimes conflicts create opportunities for the company. Keep that in mind as well. Have you ever been corrected by a person remarking, "Have you never been told you should never answer a question with a question?" People generally do not want the onus of responsibility being thrust upon them when they are passing it off to you in the first place. As I aforementioned, in my experience with contracting, there is always a need to clarify positions before responding either way. The idea that someone asks you a question and you are somehow socially obligated to answer is unnecessary. From my perspective, if you ask me a question, I have the right to inquire more before providing a final answer. For instance, if you ask me whether I want something to eat, the available choices will determine the decisions. I may want something to eat but not the options you are offering. I should be able to know my options and constraints before answering. During my youth, my parents used this social construct as a trap for my siblings and me. Coming back from playing outside, my father asked if we were hungry. Not really thinking we all confirmed that we were. If we only knew what the options were ahead of time, we might say no. I did not grow up in a household where you could change your mind without consequence. If I said no and found out that it was something I liked, you would have to starve a bit before being allowed to eat. If you said yes, and did not like what was being offered, you were in for a long period of being at the table or dealing with a sore behind. A burden being a child to foreign-born parents is that the guilt trips of there being starving children out there would not complain is a bit more impactful when you have parents who use names of people they grew up with to the faces you see on the commercials of starving children. Especially when both my parents are from two different continents. What is not contained in the question can help determine the final answer. And those details are important whether purposefully excluded or unknowingly left out. Sometimes, you may know that if your children knew what you made for them to eat, they would say no regardless of how hungry they truly are. Social constructs that encourage people to be the best forms of themselves can be very helpful to society. Or ones that promote peace, discourage crime, or promote civility. But ones that place undue burden simply because people want to adhere to saying are useless and need to be abandoned. In closing, I think it is important to challenge conventional wisdom to determine if there is any intelligence remaining in that line of thinking. New technologies and opportunities are exciting, but we must have foresight to ensure we mitigate any negative. As we head into another contentious presidential election cycle, we must focus on the facts, not narratives, outcomes, not candidates, Americans as a whole. Also, for the first time in a long time, a movie that was broadly known and liked won the Oscar for Best Movie and a whole lot of other ones. Also, Poor Little Things had a good night as well. A big thank you to all of you in the audience. Your viewership is appreciated and valued. Please follow the Christopher Peter Review on social media and continue to visit www.crcreview.com for new episodes. Thank you once again. Until next time.